was a mother and nurse who worked full-time and had 3 kids. She was ready to find love again after a friendly breakup and 2 years of getting to know herself again. She was very busy, so she didn't have much time to get out and do fun things. She started talking to a man named John on the dating app Plenty of Fish. John wasn't who she thought he was, though. She fell in love with his tailored facade, and she unknowingly let a dangerous man into her arms. Tragically, the results would be terrible. Hey everyone, welcome back to ASMR True Crime channel. Thank you for coming back and thank you for watching. If you like what I do, please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more ASMR True Crime stories. Today we're going to look at how a date from Plenty of Fish turned into a murder. Ingrid Lane was a good mother and nurse who worked very hard. She deserved to find love, but sadly she found a crazy person instead. There aren't many facts about Ingrid's early life, but it's clear that the people in her life loved her deeply. She was a bright spark who was always laughing and happy. She was also very easy to get along with. She was only a very young adult, but Ingrid already knew she wanted to work in medicine. It was because of this and the support of her family that she chose to become a nurse. It was in Tucson, Arizona that she graduated from Canyon del Oro High School. She then went to the University of Arizona to get her degree. Ingrid did very well in school, just like she did in high school. She earned her bachelor's degree at the university in 1997. 3 years after that, she moved to the small Seattle city, Renton. Ingrid was in the right place at the right time to let her career flourish. She got a job at the Seattle Swedish Medical Center after moving to the area. She was known to do a great job at the hospital, and she worked with both skill and grace. She was the kind of woman who naturally drew people to her with her lively, happy, and vibrant personality. Eventually, this included a man from the area called Phil. After meeting by chance, they fell in love pretty quickly. After a few years, they got married and had 3 kids whose names were Reese, Brooke, and Noel. Ingrid and Phil broke up after being together for 14 years. Even though they were no longer married, they stayed in touch and made sure their kids had a well-rounded childhood. So, they would often share their schedule. Phil said that his ex-wife was someone he had a lot of respect for. She cared about others and loved them, and as a mother, she would always put her children first. It takes time to fall in love and even longer to let go of love, but she was finally ready to date again 2 years after getting divorced from Phil and at the age of 40. Being a mother and nurse at the same time was a time-consuming combination. However, she wanted to start dating again, so she got the Plenty of Fish app. She looked around for someone who might catch her eye while she was there. Early on in her time on the dating app, she met John, a handsome and well-groomed guy. He was 37 years old, had green eyes, and was about 5'9" tall. His name was John Robert Charlton. He said that he didn't smoke and that he only liked drinking once in a while in his free time. He also wrote that he was a Catholic and a student from Seattle. When Ingrid read his self-written biography, she saw that his longest relationship ended a little over 2 years ago. John said, "My intent here is to simply make friends and to meet up for a conversation, not much of the crowded bar and club type. Mellow is quite more my scene. Not here for dating, only friendships. This is not some scam to get laid either. However, if we did meet up as friends and grabbed coffee, beer, comedy show, etc., whatever people do as friends." Even though the words were strange, Ingrid didn't immediately see any problems. It looked like everything was fine. John was a student, Christian, and just wanted to make friends. Soon, they were messaging each other all the time, and after a good conversation, John and Ingrid agreed to meet up in person. Because of how well their first date went, they agreed to meet again, and soon they were going on 3 or 4 dates a week. John would always go to her house in Rentham to spend time with her, and there they would go out for drinks, hang out at bars, and spend the night in bed together. A secret started to come out after some time together, but it took a while. Ingrid finally saw that John didn't seem to have his own place, and besides that, she found out that he didn't have a regular job or didn't have a car either. Even though these were the first big warning signs, Ingrid didn't seem to care. There was kindness and respect between her and John, and she really enjoyed being with him. At her job as a nurse and with her 3 little girls to take care of, Ingrid was naturally very hardworking. She thought she earned time off whenever she could get it, but it's important to note that Ingrid kept John a secret from her family and friends, even though she liked spending time with him. It looked like the main reason was that he wasn't quite the gentleman her parents had hoped for her. Either way, Friday night, April 8th in 2016 was the same as any other. Phil had already taken their 3 girls, who are now 12, 10 and 7, away for the night earlier that day. After her shift in the hospital was over, Ingrid got ready for another night out with John. She knew her daughters were safe with their dad. Ingrid and John were going to watch the Seattle Mariners play baseball at their home field. But first, they went across the street and went to a bar called Beer Gardens. The two went home after having a few drinks, but at that moment, Ingrid realized that John looked a lot more drunk than she had thought. They both got there in time to watch the game, and at this point, all we know is that they had another fun night together. The next morning, April 9th in 2016 at 7:30 a.m., Phil dropped off the kids at Ingrid's house. But as soon as he got in the house, something seemed wrong. The Toyota Highlander that Ingrid drove was nowhere to be found. He jumped out of his car and knocked on the door. It was quiet, which worried him. When she didn't answer, he called her cell phone, but still nothing. So he sent her another text message, but this time she didn't read it and didn't answer. At this point, Phil was getting a sick feeling in his stomach. Ingrid rarely didn't answer her texts, so this was a big deal. Being reliable and on time was very important to her, especially when it came to the girls. Phil called Georgia, Ingrid's mother, because he didn't know what else to do. Georgia and Ingrid were very close to each other. They shared a Verizon cell phone account and had extra keys to each other's homes. Georgia started to panic when she heard that her daughter was lost. She thought that she might be in danger. She quickly went to her daughter's house and used her extra key to get in. It was very quiet in the house, and even when she called out Ingrid's name, no one answered. Phil and Georgia found each room to be empty as they went through it, and opening the door to the master bedroom would spell serious concern. There was a strong smell of bleach in the room, and her things like her wallet, keys, and phone were all over the place, which showed that Ingrid had probably planned to be there herself. Georgia and Phil ran to their noses along the smell of bleach until they were outside the bedroom door. After opening the door, they were horrified to see a 15-inch pruning saw thrown in the sink. The blades were big and bent with cuts on them. Professional landscapers usually use pruning saws, which are great for cutting through plants and thick tree branches. After finding these terrifying clues, Georgia called 911 immediately, and police were on their way. Georgia left Ingrid's house to talk to all of their neighbors. At the same time, she sent texts to her family and friends to see if they knew where she was. One of her friends said that she had texted her around 10:30 p.m. the night before to say that she was out with John, but that she hadn't heard from her since. One of her neighbors said that they recognized the name John and thought that he might have been the last person to see her. Georgia and her daughter shared a phone account, as I said before, which was helpful because Georgia could look at all the call logs to see if anything seemed off. And in these records, Georgia saw that one number kept coming up a lot more often than the others. When they googled the number, they found the Facebook profile of Robert Charlton. She texted John for help because she needed more information badly. He would answer almost right away and say, "This is John Charlton. I thought she had her kids with her today." Georgia said that her purse, keys, and phone were at home, but her daughter was missing. She also told John that she had already called 911 for help. John's answer was, "911? What is going on? Last night we went to the Mariners game together, but we didn't stay the night because she had her kids today. I am not sure what she told you about my relationship with her." And John went silent after this message. Soon after the cops arrived, one of the first things they saw when they went into the bedroom was of course the saw. Obviously, finding a saw in the bedroom was very strange, and this made police think right away that there might have happened something bad. As the police looked more closely, they couldn't find any trace of human tissue in the bedroom. Another thing was that there were no clear signs of a fight or battle. What they didn't know was that cops were getting a very scary phone call from several miles away at the same time. A man called 911 and said, "This is going to sound really weird, but I went to get my recycling bin and there were 3 white trash bags in it. I went to lift them out and it honestly scares me, but it looks like a foot is in there." A homeowner just 10 miles from Ingrid's house found human remains in one of his recycling bins. It was clear that body parts had been cut off. The police didn't immediately memory, but after 6 hours at 4:30 p.m., they made a link between the disappearance of Ingrid and the human remains that were found. A picture of Ingrid's driver's license was matched to the remains to make sure it was her. It turned out that Ingrid's head was in pristine and showed no signs of decomposition. Because of this, the cops were saddened to find out who she was. It took a few days for tests to prove that the body parts belonged to Ingrid. It was clear that Ingrid had been strangled because there were broken blood vessels in her eyes and bleeding in her neck. Because her injuries were so bad, people thought that whoever killed her must have used a lot of force, which could mean that the person must have been angry. Her blood alcohol level was 0.74, which means she was drunk at the time of her death, but no drugs were found in her. The police didn't waste any time getting things done. Within 24 hours of finding the body, they got a search warrant for Ingrid's house and looked through her bathroom carefully. Trace amounts of blood were found in the drain. When forensic officers took out the drain and looked at the plumbing below, they saw much more obvious signs of blood and tissue. They looked around the kitchen and found an empty box of trash bags. Notably, they were the same kind of bags that were used to throw away her body parts. On April 11, just one day later, cops found a missing car that was parked in downtown Seattle, just 3 miles from Seattle Stadium. So the police knew that this was not likely to be a coincidence. Thankfully, Georgia was able to help with this, as she had successfully completed her own part of the investigation. She shared the text she had sent to John and gave them to the police. They quickly marked him as a suspect. The next day, he was found at Lake Stevens, which is about 50 miles away. John was taken in right away to be questioned, and police quickly noticed that he was acting very strangely. At first, John seemed completely uninterested and uncaring. He didn't even seem to care that his partner was either lost or dead. His mood changed to one of irritation when the police started to ask him questions. It was almost like he didn't want to help them find her. John also had scratches on his lips, chin and chest, as well as on his face and hands. Of course, this made the police even more suspicious, and they started to wonder if these cuts might have been caused by self-defense. When asked about Ingrid's absence, John kept acting like he wasn't interested. He didn't say, though, that they did go to the beer gardens before the game, and he also said that he passed out soon after the game was over and couldn't remember anything that night. John also says that Ingrid wouldn't let him stay the night because she wasn't ready for him to meet the kids, even though he and Ingrid must have made it back to her house. He seemed to get a little smarter after saying that and asked for a lawyer soon after. Officers had to let him go in the end because they didn't have any solid proof against him. He was still their top suspect though, and a lot of people thought he had something to do with Ingrid's death. As John walked away free, the cops looked for more proof. When they got back to her house, they looked everywhere for any sign that could connect John to her death. After looking for 2 days, on April 13, the police finally found what they were looking for. Their tests showed that John's DNA was clearly linked to the crime scene, which was in Ingrid's bathroom. He was then arrested and charged with first-degree murder and car theft. He was put on a $2 million bond and taken to the King County Jail. He could not get out of jail while a case was being built against him because his bond was so high. While John was in jail, more people would find out more troubling things. First, more parts were found in another Seattle recycling bin on April 15th. 3 days later, on April 18th, they were found a third time. As people learned about these findings, the media also told them that the person they thought killed Ingrid had been caught. One of John's ex-girlfriends heard about the story because it was getting a lot of press in the Seattle area. Safe to say, her story wasn't comforting. It was true that John was homeless, and she told him that she did let him stay at her house sometimes when he was interested. John was meant to help her with yard work on Saturday morning after the baseball game, but he got there a lot later than planned. When he finally got there, she saw that he had many small cuts all over his body. When John was asked about it, he seemed hostile and angry. He said someone tried to rob him, but it wasn't a big deal. Even though she knew John had been lying, she finally gave up. After that, he stayed with her for 48 hours from Friday night through Saturday and Sunday night. As a side note, that ex-girlfriend was finally invited to Dr. Phil's talk show, where she talked about what really happened that weekend. In addition, she said that John could be very loving at some times, so she wasn't shocked when she heard about the murder. It came as no surprise that this wasn't John's first time in trouble with the law. In fact, she said he had been charged with and convicted of many crimes before he met Ingrid. From 1997 to 2009, he was charged with everything from felony theft and aggravated robbery to negligent driving and 2 misdemeanor assaults. And because of these bad things, he had been jailed twice before, which he forgot to tell Ingrid. It's not a surprise that John had a hard time with drugs and drinking in the past. As his behavior got worse, so did his relationship with his parents, Ray and Joanne. And they felt so scared that in 2006 they put in for a restraining order against their own son. To be honest, this was also a fair choice. John would often show up at their house without warning, drunk and angry. He used bad language and threatening a lot. John's father also said that his son's bad habits were making things difficult in the family and that he thought his son was losing his mind and might not be able to control what he was doing. The prosecutors in this case started making a case against John as soon as the case went to court. At the same time, John's defense team did everything they could to prepare all possible counter-arguments. John Charlton was finally put on trial for what he did after almost 2 years. He would have to face Ingrid's family, friends, and people from the community. Now, John would surprise the judge by pleading guilty to murder in the first degree, even though he had initially denied being involved. This choice will luckily keep Ingrid's family and friends from having to go over the upsetting event again and give them some privacy, but the judge wouldn't let him off easily. Before giving him his sentence, she read more than 20 letters from family and friends. There were letters that told about how this crime affected the people of Renton. Ingrid was called a bright, funny he said in a heartfelt statement. There will be no more motherly advice from Ingrid. There will be no more July 4th holidays in Big Fork. There will be no more trips to the beach. And there will be no more Thursday night dinners at a steakhouse. My children's children will never have a maternal grandmother. Now, even though John threw in the towel, his defense team would still stand up in court. They told people to be careful to not make fun of someone who hadn't been found guilty yet. Even though there was a lot of proof that pointed to John, including John himself, there was never a clear motive shown, so this could have made things harder for the prosecution. Superior Court Judge Julie spoke directly to John and said, "What you did was vicious and cruel beyond anyone's belief." She initially said she would lock him up for life, but in the end she gave him 28 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence the state's guidelines allowed. But before his trial was over, John spoke to the courtroom in a movement of genuine regret. He said, "I do agree there are no words that can alleviate the pain that I have caused, and for that I'm truly sorry." After that, John was taken away to start his 28-year prison term. Thank you so much for watching another ASMR True Crime video. I really appreciate it. What do you think of this case? Also, what do you think about dating apps that make you prove who you are before you can join? As always, please leave your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more whispered true crime stories.